Fans, we are back live with another edition of the Cheap Heat Productions Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling, and we're pleased to have on today a man who was an original ECW original, and we're talking right back to the start. He also competed in the WWF and other points in between. He is known as the Hitman, Mr. Tony Stetson. Before we get to Tony,
thank you, Maurice. Pleasure, guys. Pleasure.
Thank you for coming. Before we get into the questions, I have to introduce, as per the custom now, all the way over in Ireland, Mr. Cheap Heat, Maurice Shortall. Maurice, how are you today, sir?
Good, Jack. Tony, we record this thing via Canada into Ireland, into wherever we are, where our guest is, and then out to the world. Pretty dynamic.
I love your accent, by the way.
Yeah, my internet connection is not as good as Jack's, so we base ourselves in Ireland. We stream out Canada.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, Tony, it's usually a good place to start to ask if you were a fan of the business growing up, and if so, what territories or companies did you follow that inspired you, so to speak?
Growing up, so I grew up in the 60s. So I'll be 65 next month. So I'm a little bit aged. So it was always the WWF in the 1960s. So my dad was a wrestling fan. My grandfather was a wrestling fan. And in Philly, they had this building called the Philadelphia Arena on 45th and Market Street. Back then, tickets were like $3. And there was a shoemaker around the corner from our house, and he would always put the posters in his storefront. So I would run home and tell my dad, "Yo, they're coming," and he would always take us to the matches. And this is when wrestling was wrestling, when you can actually say, even as a kid, there was nothing choreographed. It was just guys working hard. You would see the blood. You would see these monsters. I was a big fan of Bruno Sammartino naturally growing up, and I remember those guys: Professor Tanaka, Ivan Koloff, the Kentucky Butcher, Haystacks Calhoun, Crybaby Cannon, Victor Rivera, Chief Jay Strongbow, Sonny King goes on and on and on and on and on. And these guys were like larger than life to me. Well, mind you, I'm maybe 7 years old. So I fell in love with it then, never thinking that as I got older I would have an opportunity. But I got to a point after high school, I wanted to pursue it. I couldn't pursue it right away because it wasn't like it is today. Schools everywhere. So I actually didn't break into it. I was 26, which was kind of late. But yeah, I fell in love with it as a kid.
Can you talk about your training process in the famous Monster Factory under Larry Sharp?
So when I finally found an ad in a wrestling magazine for the Monster Factory, so I wrote up this letter, I sent it along, and then they eventually got a letter back, here, you come out for a tryout. Now, mind you, I'm 26. I'm by no means tall. On a good day, back then, I thought I was like 5'8". I probably wasn't even that tall. 5'7", 5'7.5". So anyway, so I go out to the Monster Factory. Back then, it was in this old beat-up airport hangar in Hainesport Township. It was an airport for like private, prop planes and all this. People have their own plane. Nothing big, nothing like the international airports. So when I finally found this place, it was basically in the middle of woods, just like buildings connected, but nobody really did anything there. But so the last building was the Monster Factory. So finally I get the nerve. I go there one night. I knock on the door. I saw there was a light on, and this guy opens the door. This guy was named Mike Moore. He was an ex-college ball player. Good 6'5", 6'6", easy 285, 290, if not better than that. He looks down at me. He says, "What do you want, kid?" And I says, "I'm here to try out." "For what?" "Wrestling." He says, you better go back home. You're too little for this." But he was just busting my chops. We became good friends afterwards. So I go in, and Larry Sharp had the school at the time, and he was partners with Buddy Rogers. So met Larry. Larry showed up, and at the time, Bigelow was living there because he was in the beginning stages of his career. So then Scotty came out. I met Scotty. We connected right away, and I did my tryout. He says, "Well, it's up to you." He says, "You're going to have to put on some size. You're small," because I was like $185. I said, "All right, yeah, I want to do this." So right after that, I started training the next week. And for 2 weeks, you didn't even touch nobody. It was all about running the ropes, taking your bumps, running the ropes. And them 2 weeks beat me down like you cannot imagine. People don't realize when you're hitting ropes how hard. So ultimately, when it was time to start training, it was actually Bigelow trained me from start to finish. Because he was at the school, so they were using him as a trainer. So every night I'd be in the ring with Scotty 4 nights a week for 2-3 hours. And when I say he taught me the old school, hard school way, he did, which I was grateful for, because nowadays some of these guys, oh God, if you brush them, oh, you hit me too hard, you hit me. That's not the business. That's not what I grew up into. I used to see these guys beat the hell out of each other. So, we're going through training. More guys came in, and a good friend of mine, Jeff Gripley, he was at the Monster Factory before me. And he was just coming off his first match. He wrestled the AWA was down in Atlantic City doing TV. And he had worked with the Road Warriors. When I met him, he had a broken hand because whatever they did to him, it wound up breaking his wrist or something. So I said, well, this is the real deal. So a few months go by. I'm training every night, 4 nights a week. So now Vince McMahon reaches out to Larry Sharp about Bigelow. So they were going to give him his audition. It was December 9th, 1985. So 2 days before Scotty's audition, Larry says to me, he said, I want you to take a ride up with Scotty. A couple other guys are going to go. And when you're in the locker room, keep your mouth shut, your ears open. Don't say nothing. Got it. As we're driving up, Scotty turns to me, he says, Tone, he says, when they ask me who I want to work with, I'm going to tell them I want to work with you. I says, you sure, Scott? It was no big deal for me because it was just going to be like another night of training. So we get in there and I go up to everybody. I showed respect. And then I was sitting next to Morocco, and Morocco was trying to smart me up to the business and, telling me about different situations, different guys, how guys get more work than others and all that stuff. So now it's time for Bigelow's dark match. Now, mind you, TV tapings, they were done in Poughkeepsie, New York. And we're talking, this was a good 4 or 5 hours worth of tapings because I think they would tape maybe 3 weeks at a shot. So now they call Scotty up. It was, I think, Freddie Blassie, Jules Strombo, and a couple other guys at the time. He said, okay, well, here's going to be your spot. This is your dark match. We're going to film it, but the people at home won't see it. All right, who do you want to work with? And he said, I want to work with Tony. He points to me. Now, mind you, I'm still like $185. My hair is orange. I was on my way to becoming a bleach blonde, but didn't get there yet. So they turned and they looked. They said, you want to work with that? Not him, that. He says, yeah. He says, look, man, you're going to ruin your opportunity. No. George Scott says, whoever I want to work with, that's who I want to work with. So now he says, all right, go ahead. Do what you want. So I put my gear on, we gear up, and we didn't even have to talk because I knew I was out there to make him shine. And it didn't take much to make Scotty shine. He was that good. So my first experience in a ring in front of a crowd was in Poughkeepsie, New York, and had to be a few thousand people. Never had the opportunity of stepping in front of a crowd, maybe 50 people, just to get my feet wet. So, but I didn't have nerves because it was Scotty. So I walk out and right away they're busting on me about my hair. And I'm like, oh man, what did I get myself into? So I go to the ring. And it was weird because I said this to Bay on his podcast. My first few matches, it was like I knew the crowd was there, but I couldn't see the crowd. It was like I was in a bubble because you're like caught up in that moment. So now here comes Scotty, and they're busting him even more. His head wasn't fully tatted yet. He just had some little stuff in the front. So he gets in the ring. I look at him. He looks at me. I got to cover my face because now I'm starting to laugh because I'm thinking this is too comical. So match starts, and he does all his stuff, all his big moves. And I just take the bump. Everything worked out great. I come back. They loved him. And then right away they start work. He says, oh, now that, which is me, now was going to start working with the guys who are there. So I think later on that night, I think I worked with the Hart Foundation, and then they would keep having us back. So when I was doing TV there, I worked with the Hart Foundation, Beefcake Valentine, Hart Foundation again, and then I think after that, I was going to do work with Randy Savage. So Savage comes up to me, says, so how many matches? How long you been? I said, I'm new to business. All right, how many matches you had? I said 3. He went, oh. He said, listen, just follow me out there. Don't worry about doing anything. I'll guide you through the whole thing. So we go out and we have this match, and obviously he was just guiding me in the ring, out the ring, the whole bit. It was smooth, easy, and he wound up dropping 2 elbows on me for the finish. So we come back down. He said, oh, man, that was great. He says, if we ever work again, I'm going to give you some spots so you're not out there just like a punching bag, because back in the 80s, that's what you were. Mm-hmm. Matches were 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. 5 minutes would be long. So we continued to keep going back for TV, and then I worked with Tiger Chung Lee, Hercules Hernandez, the Sheik, and Nikolai Volkov. There might have been a few others. So now now here comes Savage again. He said, right, listen, I'm going to get with you before we go out. I'm going to give you a couple spots. At the time, they were doing the angle with George Steele with the flowers with Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. So actually, the month before, my buddy had to do that squash, and he came back and I mocked him. That's never going to happen to me. I ain't going to let that happen to me. He got pinned like in about 30 seconds. So time goes by. I don't see Savage. So now they say, Stetson, you're up. So I'm at the door, and I see a bouquet of flowers put on the table right in front of me, and I just thought, oh, no. So here's Randy. He says, all right, we got to make it quick. I said, how quick is quick? Jump you, clothesline you, power slam you, elbow. Hey, paying your dues. Comes in, he jumps me, clotheslines me because I am so tall. He caught me right in the lip, split my lip. I take the bump. So now I know, okay, let me get ready for the power slam. As I'm on my hands and knees, I feel boom, boom, boom. He forgot it. So he's already on the top turnbuckle, ready to drop the elbow. I'm on my hands and knees. So then he dumps me outside the ring, and so I'm walking back, and the first one that sees me is Bret Hart, and he sees that my lips just busted open. And the month before that, he split my lip open. So he said, oh, what happened here? I said, I don't know. It seems to be a habit around here. Taking a shot at him, like, what the hell? So Randy comes back and says, oh, what happened out there? I said, the power slam. He said, oh, man, I'm sorry, my bad. So at that point, Jay Strongbow, it was like Arnold Skull and Jay Strongbow. Jay Strongbow was starting to tell me when to come back for the next TV tapings. Prior to that, they would go through Larry Sharp. So me and Jeff Ripley are in the Monster Factory. I believe it was a Monday night, because we used to go up on Tuesday to do this. And Jeff says, Boom, what time you picking me up here tomorrow? And Larry's sitting there. He says, picking you up for what? I said, we're going up to do TV for WWF. No, don't do that no more. They're just making a fool of you. Here, because they went directly through me, he wasn't getting his booking percentage. But in the meantime, when I started doing that, me and Jeff Ripley and a couple other guys, we were going up after, I think, our first TV taping for the WWF. This guy, Mike Moore, the first guy I met when I was at the Monster Factory, Rick Martel and Dino Bravo had a promotion in Montreal, and they were bringing Mike in to do territory. So he was taking a few of us up. So Rick was so cool. So cool. Dino was, not that we didn't get along. He wasn't a big talker. Rick was a jokester. I was pale white, and first time he met me, so where'd you get that great tan? I'm as white as can be. So anyway, we start working up there. We were there for a couple months. We would go up on the weekends, and a lot of times it would tie into, we would do Montreal, and on our way back, we were doing the WWF TV. And then once Larry told us to stop, I'm green in the business. We're figuring this is for our good here, hindsight's 2020, because the guys are starting to like me and starting to like Jeff, and we would have kept going. Something may have developed where we maybe got some house shows, but needless to say, it didn't happen. So we were working for Martel until one fatal night. one of my buddies who I trained with, he came up with me, and we were doing a tag against Tom Zink and Dan Crawford. The finish was supposed to be Zink's getting me in the sleeper. And I start the match. I forget who I started with, but then I tag out to my buddy Joe. And right in front of me, Crawford suplexes him. Now, they know we're green. We're in the business maybe not even 6 months. I see the ref count 1, 2, 3. And I just said, uh-oh. Now, you got an experienced ref, you got an experienced wrestler. What should they have done? The ref should have said, kick out. Dan Crawford should have said, kick out. I said, Joe, why did you do that? Oh, it felt like such a perfect suplex. I didn't feel right to kick out. So we go in the back. Tom Zink's crying. Oh, it was supposed to be. That was a big angle. I had to put the sleeper on and this. And Rick Martel said, Tom, calm down, calm down. So now we're doing TV up here. So now I got to work with the Tonga kid. Tonga was cool. All the Samoans. I'm close with some of the Samoans. And Samu was working the territory up there too. So I'm working with Tonga. Larry taught us if anybody ever takes you in the ring and shoots you without calling a spot, don't take it because you don't know what they're going to do. But he also said, if you're ever in there with a vet and you piss them off, don't be surprised if they lay stuff in. So we're working the match, and Tonga shoots me, but he doesn't call it. He clearly sets me up for a Samoan backdrop. What do? I pull him down. That didn't go over too well. He picked me up, and he was just shooting on me, shooting, dumping me on my head, this, that, and the other. He wound up going up the turnbuckle, gave me 2 headbutts that were stiff as can be, and then the third time, it was a big splash. Took my air out, the whole bit. Then that was the last time we worked for Rick Martel. So that ended that little TV stint up there.
Was that the Tonga kid you said? Not King
the
Tonga?
Tonga kid, yeah.
Tonga kid. Okay.
Yeah, and he came. They fly. They come, and he didn't cushion himself when he splashed me, and all the air went out, and I got to rock and roll till I hit the floor to get air back in. But that's how you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's kind of a silly question, but do you regret not staying in the WWF back then?
Looking back now, yeah, I had 3, maybe 4 big missed opportunities. That would have been one. If I knew more, if I was more in tune with the business, I would have just kept going regardless. Then there was a time this guy, Joe, who took the premature pin, him and his partner, they did this mass gimmick, mass chaos. So when they were fully trained, they were sending out their photos everywhere. So they got a booking down in Puerto Rico with, and I think the booker was Victor Ganones. I think that's his name. And they came back. They said, yeah, we love the way you work. You got any more guys who work like this? So the next time me and Jeff Gripley went down. So what was cool about Puerto Rico, aside from being very dangerous, because the fans are like full into it. So I had to work 2 matches. It was TV. One was with the super medic, who was Jose Estrada. Then the second one was Sweet Brown Sugar. Now, the heels are on one side of the building. Faces are on the other side. You don't talk. You don't meet them. You don't do nothing. You don't see them until you're in the ring with them. Ref just comes and tells you a finish. So now I go out there, and the funny thing is they had this Eric Emery. You guys know Eric Emery, right?
Yes.
We could have passed for twins because at the time my hair was finally bleached blonde, and we were the same size. So we're getting to work with Super Medic. So we lock up, and I take him back in the ropes, and I'm thinking, let me call a spot. So I shoot him for a flying clothesline. It's either he's not going to take it and give me a beat down, or he's going to take it. He took it, and then I'm thinking, wow, I finally get to work. So I, did my stuff, my heel stuff. Then it was time to put him over. I put him over. So now, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes later, I got to go back in with Sweet Brown Sugar. So now I got a little, not feeling cocky, but I'm confident. So I say to the ref, I go up to the ref. I says, tell him I'm going to jump him. And he went over, whispered, and Sweet Brown Sugar just nodded his head. And we did the whole thing, boom, 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 same type of thing, the heel heat. When I came back, Victor Ganones came up to me and says, do you have a job? I says, yeah. He says, can you get 6 months off? I said 4. He said, I want to bring you down here full time, working 7 days a week. Now, I'm only in the business almost a year. So proper protocol, you would have thought I would have learned from the WWF mishap. I says, here's Larry's number. Just let him know when you want me. So when I came back, I gave Larry the heads up. He said, all right, I'll get you going. As soon as I get that call, we'll take care of it. Well, at the time, that's when Larry was taking Scotty down to Memphis. So they were going, I don't know what the first stretch was. So Larry told me, he says, when I come back, I'm going to send you down to Memphis. Larry needed me to stay behind because I had to run the school. Because at the time I was the most, I was here every night, and he trusted me with the new students. So that was one opportunity. If that would have came and I gave Victor my number, it would have been a whole different game. Because the knowledge I would have got down there, you can't even buy that. That's just working 7 nights a week. And another missed opportunity. Back in '88, I did this tour of Europe. Me, Ted Petty, who became Rocco Rock. Alpha, they had some of the Glow Girls, some guys from Minnesota. So we did this 3-week tour of Europe. So the tour went great, but I always had a full-time job because at the time my kids were young. They were like maybe 4 and 1, 4, 5 and 1. So every time I would get the call to do another tour, I couldn't go. I couldn't get off of work. I passed up 5 world tours. I mean, they did Australia. They went everywhere. And every time they called, and Ted Petty would say, Tony, you got to go to one. I says, Ted, I can't get off work. I'll lose my job. You need something stable, because wrestling's, you could be up here today and nobody tomorrow. So after the 5th tour that I declined, they never called me again. That would have been another break, because it seemed like after that, that's when Teddy started to get more work. I think Johnny Grunge went with him on some of them tours, and they had guys that were incredible workers. David Isley from the Carolinas, all these guys. So I missed all of that. The other one was when we did our first TWA show at Temple McGonigal Hall. It was me and Hot Body. Paul Heyman was there. Now, I knew Paulie from couple months into training because he took my first promo shots, and I liked Paul. So we did the first show, and then after that, I was away for a week with my family, and this is before cell phones. When I came back home, I had a message from Paul. He says, Tony, call me back right away. There's a full-time opening in WCW. You'd be perfect for it. By the time I called him that quick, boom. He says, it's too late. Somebody took it. So back then I had trust in Paul, and I'll tell you later on how that trust led to non-trust. So that was that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, Tony, you mentioned, we talked to a lot of people on this show that have worked with the Hart Foundation. You mentioned that Brett obviously hit you that time and busted you open. Did he apologize for that?
He never said nothing to me after the matches. Hart, he would always come up to me. He says, he said, my dad said he saw the match that you did for us. Thank you so much. That was awesome, awesome, awesome. They didn't really have to say nothing. I think the thing is, that was another situation when Hart had me up for that finish of theirs, because I'm short. There wasn't much clearance. So he only had to talk. So I came looking back now, it's inevitable it would have happened. Short sometimes is not a good thing. It is what it is.
When you were doing those shots in the WWF, did you work with any particular agents at the time, or happen to encounter, of course, Mr. McMahon?
No, I saw him once downstairs, but that was it. Everything was kind of like separate. All the guys, like Hogan was never in the same locker room. It would be like the Bulldogs and Valentine, Beefcake, the Hart Foundation, Morocco, and all those guys. But other than that, yeah, I only saw him the one time. And the only communication I had with the office was Jay Strongbow giving me dates. So.
Yeah, do you want to talk about then obviously you're best known for your time, we'll say, in ECW, but you were there, as Jack alluded to, in the early days. So how did that opportunity come up then? Obviously, maybe through Paul, was it?
So I always say this: you can't talk ECW without talking TWA. But before I got to TWA, back then there was an okay amount of independence, but it ain't like it is today. On any given night, you have 5 shows within 10 miles of each other. I had worked, Mad Dog DC Drake was booking for the NWF out of New Jersey. And a buddy of mine that lived across the street from me, he was a boxing manager he managed some big name boxers. And he was friends with Don. So when Don was doing his TV, he says, "Hey, this friend of mine, he's a good guy. How about you book him?" He said, "I seen him, on the WWF." He says, it's not good. He says, "No, that's, how that business is." So he's all right, I'll give him a shot. So I started working for Don. At the time, I still had the bleach blonde hair. So it would usually be me and Jeff Gripley. We would go. We would do a lot of things together. And then I got to know Don. They started using me good. A lot of times I would work with Jeff on the shows, or, maybe Cousin Luke or this one or that one. But it was always give and take, give and take. Finally, this one show before we were set to do TV on a Saturday, that Friday, I says, I'm done with this blonde hair. They ain't doing nothing for me. So I buzzed my head, and I still had some roots, so I dyed it black. And I had this big goatee, kind of like Jack's, but all black. Not now. I'm all gray too, so don't take it as a dig.
Used to be.
So I show up at the thing, and I had this bandana. I had a totally different look. So I'm talking to Don. He says, "Tony," says, "You know what? I'm going to tag you with Tony the Hitman Stetson." He gave me that Hitman gimmick. I didn't pick it. And it was funny because I think that night I had to work with Schultz, Dr. D. So he introduced me to Schultz, and he says, "He's a doc. He's a good guy, And we had a good match. I put him over. He took, naturally most of the match. He's a big name. But then from that point on, they were using me more. I would get to do my stuff, and it got better and better. Eventually, I don't know why they stopped running, but they did. And how I got connected with Joel Goodhart with TWA. I just came off. I had tour. I was training one night at the Monster Factory. This promoter came in from California to take a look at me and this guy, Randy Lewis. He was going to run a series of shows out there, and he wanted us. In the process, Randy was this big juiced up musclehead. Great guy. We got along. I can work with him because we trained together. Nobody else could, because he didn't really flow and he was stiff. So he monkey flipped me out of corner. He sent me so high. When I landed, I tore my meniscus tendon in my right knee. And I knew right at that moment it was torn because when I was playing semi-pro football, I tore the left one, and it was the same pain. So naturally, I was out. So now, 6 weeks later, I healed up quick. I really pushed my therapy. So a buddy of mine who I grew up with, he used to do newsletters for the NWA, and he knew Joel. He says, "Joel's running the show out in Valley Forge." He says, "Take a ride with me, and I'll introduce you." I was still blonde at the time. And we went there, and it just so happens this guy no-showed. So I that was the first time I worked for him. We got along great, the whole bit. When he started doing some shows here and there. He would always book me. When he really went full force into TWA, it was DC Drake and Larry Winters. They were the first show, and then me and Hotbody were doing the first show at Temple. And Hotbody was new to the business, but I knew Johnny from South Philly because we trained at the same gym, and I knew he was training. So when he says, we were talking one day, I said, "John," I says, "we can do something with the South Philly thing." I says, "When the time's right and we get booked, we're going to give them something that they've never seen." And that's hard to do in the wrestling business. Because, down south for years, it's all that hardcore blood and guts. But up here in the Northeast, you didn't see that. Everything was generic. Tackle, drop down, body slam, drop kick, take a powder, that kind of stuff. So the first Temple show, Joel booked me and Johnny. It was just going to be a regular match, just to get him, out there. They brought in, I think, Paul Orndorff, Tully Blanchard, all these big names. And this was actually a show Paul Heyman was at. So before we go out, Johnny's nervous. I said, and Joel comes up to him and says, John, Maurice, you probably sound like you're hearing a broken record if you listen to this on bass thing, don't you? I can see you going, oh, no, he's talking about that again.
No, I was just like looking down because I'm actually fucking dying with the flu and I just felt a little bit sick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, boy. Heal up quick.
As Jack will attest to, I was just kind of like,
all right.
Oh, shit.
Now I feel bad. I just took a shot at you.
No,
you're right.
If he passes out, we'll continue. No worries.
Yeah,
Tony.
yeah. I'll go with that. So
it was the way
Joe
I moved.
comes up to Johnny. He says, John, I really like you. He says, I can't have you on any more shows. I can't. I'm afraid you're not going to be able to do what you have to do. So Johnny's like, I said, John, relax. I said, just follow me out there. So we go out, and this typical match that should have been in the ring was outside the ring. And the audience just grabbed on us because I told them when we ever start working, everything is stiff. We lay everything in. If you were 2 feet away from us, they ain't playing. People legit thought we hated each other. We had such a close bond to be able to work like that. I mean, we used to knock the hell out of each other, but that's what we choose to do because we were both short. Johnny's actually shorter than me. So, after that match, they did an angle with me and Joel Strongbow for a strap match. And Joel had the Wrestling Radio show, and they got flooded. Everybody wanted to see me and Johnny again. And from that moment, the next thing was a first blood match. And I recently saw that somebody posted it, and you can see that nothing was pulled. I mean, we laid everything in, and that's what the fans wanted. Unfortunately, the society thrives on violence, even back then. And then from there, we just start going and going and going. And Joel had these mega cards, and with no TV, we draw 1,500, 2,000 people. That was unheard of. Mm-hmm. If we had media, if we had TV, who knows what would have happened.
I was going to actually ask you about that being one of the, the innovators in the Northeast anyways, you're touching on that hardcore style. Was that influenced at all by the Memphis product? And the second part of that question is, can you talk a little bit about the role Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert had in TWA in terms of the very, very unique product, as you're mentioning, that was out there?
So I'm going to say this before I really get into Eddie. In roughly on and off 20 years that I spent inside the business, Eddie Gilbert was the only guy who was ever 100% honest with me. When he took over the book in ECW, and he came up to me, he says, Tone, he says, this is what I want to do to you. A, B, C, and D. Sure enough, he did A, B, C, and D. I respected Eddie. I admired his work. And he did, what he did in TWA with Mick Foley. That was cool. So Joe started bringing in all these big names, but then the money was going out because he used to pay well. And I'll never forget this one time I had to work with. Was working with Mick Foley. We had a Friday and Saturday night show back to back, and I was working with Mick on a Saturday. So he came up to me after the show. He says, Tone, he says, I got some ideas for the match tomorrow. I said, hey, Mick, whatever you want to do. We can talk about it tomorrow. You don't have to tell me now. He said, I got this one spot that's cool. I'm going to do such and such, but I want you to smack me. He says, but don't smack me like you smack Hot Body. When you smack me, hit your arm. I never did. I just to patronize him, I did it, but I felt like this ain't me. And look at what he went on to do. And he was worried about getting smacked by me. There were guys in the business who were afraid to work with me in Hot Body because they thought that's the only way we knew how to work. In fact, when we were doing the TWA shows, Ted Petty, they used to use his ring. And every match, he would come up to me in Hot Body. You guys got to stop this nonsense. This ain't wrestling. This ain't that. Nobody wants to see it. And then where did he make his money doing what?
ECW.
Right? Yeah. Same thing with Gary Wolf. him and Anthony, they went down to the Carolinas. They were working with Steamboat down there. And Gary was in South Philly too. So I saw him one day at the gym. He says, I can bring you and Johnny down to Carolinas, but you just got to learn how to work. I said, we learn how to work. We know how to work. No, you can't be doing this stuff that you're doing here. I says, Gary, do you realize this is how we got over? We had to do this because otherwise we're two little guys. Like, what are we doing? We made sure people bought into what we did, and they did. And that's what was important. And the funny thing is, check this out. Let's get as we became ECW, there was like a maybe 4 to 6 months dead time where we didn't run nothing. So when Todd took over ECW, he said he wanted to change the direction that we were at. He didn't like all the blood and guts, the hardcore. So, but yet the first show, it was February, I forget the date, 1992. Well, him and Sandman were always tight, so he always got the top spots. But me and Ivan Koloff were working the second main event. Funny thing is with Koloff, going back to when I was a kid going to the arena, I was scared to death of Tora Tanaka and Ivan Koloff. Here, the first ECW show, it's me and Ivan. You couldn't meet a nicer man on the face of this earth than Ivan, a pure gentleman. We sit down, Todd's introduced us, and we're talking. We're just having a casual conversation, not even talking about the match, just talking. Todd comes over, he says, Ivan, he says, I need a big favor. He says, can you put Tony over? He's our top babyface. Can you put him over with a DQ? He says, no, Todd. Let him pin me clean in the middle of the ring. Then I'll jump him with the chain, and we'll come back with the chain match. And I'm thinking, well, this is pretty cool. We went, I don't know how many minutes. This guy did not take a deep breath. He must have been in his mid-50s then. And it was like so easy, so smooth. Then after I pinned him, he jumped, did the whole chain thing, which actually got a nice 3-page spread in one of the magazines. It was the victory and the beating of a lifetime, Tony Stetson, but I didn't call up. So then we came back in a chain match. So that wasn't veering off of the hardcore stuff. We went right back into it. So we did that. And then from there, that's when Sal Balomo did the Wyoming gimmick. A lot of people don't remember this. Me and Sal had a series of matches. And we had some down at the bars on the Delaware Avenue, the clubs. But whenever we would work, it would be so out of control because we would do the same thing me and Johnny did. I kept keeping that formula. It worked for me with me and Johnny. It's going to work with Sal. And Sal was cool with that. I remember the first time we worked together, we go in the back and Todd's saying, guys, you can't work for me. I said, why? You're too destructive. You're too violent. I said, Todd, this is what we do. And every time we would wrestle, he would always threaten to fire us because we were too out of control. So finally, we built that angle for a stretch. And then he was going 6 months to wrestle in Belgium. So we did this loser leave ECW thing. Sal was so cool, man. So cool. And unfortunately, not much of that ever made it to TV back then. I mean, we were doing TV. We first did Cabrini College TV out of there. Then we went to the Chestnut Cabaret, and that's when that's when me and Sal were really doing our crazy stuff. And I'll tell you a funny story. You guys know the Metal Maniac?
Yes.
Okay. First time I met Jeff, we're up in the Northeast. And this was before we crowned the first ECW. This was Todd's show, the first ECW show. This was right before he was going to put me in a program with Sal. So Jeff's in the back, and he's all tanned up. He's got that great look, and so we're sitting there, we're hitting it off, we're talking, and he says, Morocco trained him because he lived in Hawaii and blah blah blah. So I turned to him. I said, Jeff, how long have you been in the business? I'm thinking he's been in the business longer than me. Oh, 6 months. I said, oh. So they wanted to do this angle because, him and Jimmy Snuka had this ridiculous amount of matches. They were just tight. So they did a double battle royal that night, and the two winners want to face off to be the first ECW champ, I think, which was Snuka. So there was a point he was going to try to interfere. He was going to be on the outside of the apron, and I was going to come out the back and hit him with a chair. So we're in the locker room. They told us what we're doing. So Jeff says, can you show me how you're going to hit me? I said, no, you'll know. How will I know? I said, trust me, you'll know. So when I went, I protected him, but it was the stiffest chair shot, and it was like a cannon went off. Then he came back and said, I guess that's why you said I would know. But Jeff was cool. Jeff was a big guy. When we worked a lot of matches, he hated when I chopped him. He didn't, but he's one of these big burly guys that don't like to be easy. You'd be surprised how many guys are like that in the business.
That's tremendous.
I did talk to Jeff about coming on the show. It was a long time ago, but he said he wanted to go for 3 hours, a 3-hour show, and I was like, "Oh man,
Jeff, because once Jeff starts talking, Jeff don't stop."
Maybe we will get him on maybe early someday and split it up into sections. 3 hours is a long time. I know you went 4 in your last podcast, but that was under different circumstances.
Yeah. It's funny talking about being stiff. Before TWA, I think I was working with the NWF at the time. And I was still like trained guys at the Monster Factory. Because it was always good. It was good conditioning for me because I would be in the ring 3-4 hours a night, just working with the next one. This guy Mark Tedler, who was an old time WWF wrestler, big dude. He was running a show in North Carolina and he needed a ring, so he came to Larry because Larry had rings. So he says, Larry, I need to rent a ring, but I need you to get it down in North Carolina. But if you send 3 guys, I'll make them work. So it was me, this dude Chris Evans, and this other kid Bobby. I forget what Bobby wrestled under. He was a young kid, just breaking in. So we took the ring down there. We set it up. It was in a military base. I forget what the name of it. Cherry Point military base. So the main event was, so Chris was going to work with this kid Bobby, and they didn't know who they were going to work me yet. So Slaughter was the headliner, and he was going to work with a German guy, but the German guy bailed. He couldn't make it. So Tedler's panicking. So Slaughter gets us all together. At the time, I'm tan out the wazoo, in great shape, blonde hair, and my goatee was black. He looks around and says, here's what we're going to do. Have a battle royal, put him over, then I'll wrestle him for the America's belt. And I thought, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. So now I'm in the business good 2 years. So now I know not all the ins and outs, but most of the ins and outs. So I go up to Slaughter. We talk a little bit, introduce myself. We talk a little bit. Just basically told me to finish. He said, do whatever you want out there. So we go out there, and right away I take the heat. Because he's as short as I am. That's how tall and big as he is. So his first comeback, he punches me in the face. When I say he clocked me. And I thought, I'm thinking back to what Larry said. If you're in there with a vet and they stiff you, you pissed them off or you did something stupid. So I take it. I didn't mind it, made it look legit. It was legit. Snapmares me over, trounces on my nose. I just, out of reaction, sat up. And if you get hit in the nose, you start crying. So tears, I'm thinking, I can't be crying in the ring. I'm not crying. It's just a reaction. So then we go back and I'm thinking, I guess my offense is done. I get the heat again. We go. He's working with me in the ring, out the ring. He juices this, that, and the other. So now it's time for the finish. The finish was a clothesline and the Cobra Clutch. The clothesline damn near decapitated me. And then the Cobra Clutch literally almost put me out. So, but the match was on point. So I go in the back, and he was traveling with Don Cornudo. I says, Don, was he okay with that? He said, oh my God, yeah. He made these extra money selling his little flags. He says he wanted you to have whatever money he made. I thought, oh, that's cool. So now I wait for him to shower and all. I says, go up to me. So I said, out of respect, thank you so much. I said, was everything okay out there? Did I piss you off or do something I shouldn't have? What do you mean? Oh, he says, I forgot to tell you, I don't know how to work light, so I have to work stiff. That's why he was stiff, which is cool. I don't mind that. But I guess he could have gave me a heads up, so I know when I'm going to get it. But yeah, but he was so cool. And he was another guy who says, if we're ever on the same show, I'll ask to work with you. So I had a good my reputation starting to get good. And then then the whole ECW thing, wow, that's a whole nother story. When we turned into ECW, Larry Winters was the booker. Todd didn't like the direction he was going. That's when he brought in Eddie Gilbert. And Eddie Gilbert, at the time I was a face. Yeah, I think me and Larry just beat the Eliminators. They're by AJ, and they're going to crucify me because I forget what they're giving. The Big Doug and AJ. What was their the Mask Executioners or Mask?
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, I know it's Super
I
Destroyers.
can't remember, boy. If he hears this, he's going to call me up. So what happened to the light? So after we beat them for the straps, and then we dropped the Hot Body and Chris Candido, Eddie comes up and he says, "I'm going to turn you heel. We're going to do a battle royal for the first Pennsylvania heavyweight champion," and they were putting Tommy Cairo over. He says, "But I want to do a spot when you're trying to get Hot Body and Candido out, and Larry winds up dumping you all, and you turn on him." So we do that. We turn, boom, and it was good heat. Nice, good. And then turn me heel. Then me and Larry had a first blood we had a couple matches, grudge matches and stuff. And then when I worked with Tommy Cairo, they put the strap with me then. And then I gave him a return match. But then after that, they eliminated the title. It was after the second match with Tommy for the Pennsylvania belt. They were bringing me and Hot Body together as a team. So they hyped it up, but never gave us a direction. I got to put my glasses on because I can't see. I'm not real good with working this little. Can you see me as clear as you did earlier?
Yes, sir.
Oh, so
100%.
You're talking about the Super Destroyers, right?
Yeah, so they brought me and Johnny together. They put the belts on us. They said we won it from a tournament from Eddie and Doug Gilbert. So we were running with that for a little bit, and we worked with the Rotten Brothers, and this, that, and the other. And eventually, what I think it was one of the November to Remember shows, we had just beat the Rotten Brothers, and then Tom Brandy, Johnny Gunn, and Tommy Dreamer came out, and they quick challenged us and beat us like in 10 seconds and took the belts. Here, they weren't happy. Todd and Paulie wasn't happy with us because, we would come in clowning with big glasses and all, but yet we're still working. And then Paulie says, "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep you guys as a tag, and each match you're going to have these little conflicts with each other. When the time's right, I'm going to split you up, and you're going to do your feud that you did before, but this time it'll be on TV." And I thought, wow, finally people will get to see what we did. Well, Johnny had a different mindset. Johnny would say to me, "But we did that already." I said, "John, but nobody saw it. Only people that saw it who came to the shows." So we were building that angle. Then all of a sudden, I get a call from Todd, and he says, "Tony, I hate to tell you, Johnny quit, and we got nothing for you." I said, "What?" So I sat out for 6 months. Finally, I get a call. I don't know if I called Todd back or he called me. And actually, wait, let me backtrack one thing. At the time when we were doing the split, we were supposed to go do interviews on this Sunday. Johnny was going to be here somewhere in Peoria, Pennsylvania. I got lost. I never made it. So I think Paulie had an attitude with that. So when I was doing a match with Donnie Allen, and Johnny was in the Eagle's Nest making commentary, and he said something derogatory on my personal life that shouldn't be. I was going through a wicked divorce at the time. The last thing I needed was that. I called Paulie up. Paulie's the type, if you call him, he'll never call you back. I left a message. He called me right back. He says, Tone, I'm so sorry, because I went off. Tone, what do you want me to do? You want the strap? I says, told Paulie, just leave my personal life out of it. Yeah, I says, I told you before, I'm going through some stuff. I don't need this extra nonsense. Shortly after that, Johnny quit. We were out. then I think Todd contacted me, if I'm not mistaken. He says, come on back. I was going back to the arena. When I go back that night, here's Johnny. And I was surprised to see him because we didn't talk too much in between that. We actually were doing work for Dino Santa, where we did some crazy stuff for him. And the first night we were there, I called Todd, I called Paul, and I called Hot Body. I says, we were in a little circle. I said, listen, last time you just because you thought we were joined at the hip because we did all this stuff for like 2 years, all we did was wrestle each other. I says, the way he thinks and I think are different. I said, he's going to quit again. Don't screw me over. No, we get it. So now we go back and we're going to build up the split again. Johnny said that was enough. He came in, he had a big falling out with Paulie, he quit, he was actually ready to go after him. This was right before I came in the building. So I came in and everybody said, well, what's up with your boy? I said, what are you talking about? Hot Body, he's just left him and Paulie gotten into it and it almost got physical. So I looked up, Paulie was up high. I said, Paul, you going to screw me over again? No, Tone, no, we got you. Joey Styles comes up to me, says, Tony, says, this is what we want to do. We want to change your gimmick. I says, you can make me the pizza man, Joey. I says, I just want to work. Because they were calling me and Johnny Broad Street Bullies. So then they said, this was 95, I think. The Flyers and Devils were in the Cup Finals or whatever. So they made me the Broad Street Bully. So the debut of Broad Street Bully went over big. That's when we were selling out the arena. And it was a quick beat down. I beat this kid. It was Rob Feinstein's friend, this guy, Doug. He had the Jersey Devil gimmick on, and it went over good. I'm thinking, wow. At first, I'm like, I got to wear the Flyers jersey, the stick, the gloves, and that's a lot of stuff to lug back and forth. But I liked it. It went over good. Started using me pretty good with that. Then I worked with JT Smith, who I've worked with many times. And it was, I don't know, right before or after we worked. I worked with him, then they tagged us up. And then it was when I don't know if you remember, JT fell out the ring and hit his head. And they were saying, oh, you must be Italian. So then we were the original FBI. JT, he was going to teach me how to be Italian. So we were the original FBI. And at that time, we would do things together. We do things separately. And they were teasing this angle with Axel Rotten and me. He would come in with the barbed wire bat and hit me with it and all. So in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, barbed wire to hockey stick. How cool was that? They were just giving me cookie crumbs, only to just snatch that cookie right out from under me. The one night I went back in, my last night at the arena, I went up to Paulie. I said, Paulie, what do you got for me? He said, Tony, he said, I got nothing for you. I said, really? When Paulie took over the book, he came up to me and Hot Body. He says, word for word, guys, as long as I'm running the book, as long as I'm here, you guys will always have a job. It's what you guys started is taking us to the direction where we want to go. I put a little trust in that. Well, needless to say, talk is cheap. So I knew I was done. So I come back and Todd said, what's wrong? I says, so I started complaining to him. And then I'll never forget, Tommy Dreamer comes over. He says, oh, Tony, he said, what's that? You got fresh gig marks? I said, no, Tommy. I says, this is when I was bleeding for this company for nothing, just to get us off the ground. Word for word. He said, we got you to thank for that. You're the pioneer of all this. If it wasn't for you, none of us would be here. I said, you feel that way, Tommy? We all do. I says, how about you do something for me? You know what he did? What can I do? He was so tight with Paulie. All he had to do was say, yo, Paulie, take care of the guy. And that was it. And then from there, you see how they elevated, making big money and all that. And then at that point, that's when we really went to work for Dino. And we're doing some crazy hardcore stuff for him. Dino gave us full reign, do whatever we wanted. So that was cool for us. But it wasn't what it could have been. So,
in terms of your run there in ECW, and you look back, you touched on it in terms of how influential.
Right, Jack, are you talking? Because I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me, Tony?
I can't hear you guys.
Wow. How about now?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
You can hear me? I can't hear you guys.
I'd say he got a phone call. I'd say.
I can't hear you either, Maurice.
Yeah, you're gonna have to. I know why I'm talking because he can't hear us, but he's gonna have to go back out and go back in if you want to knock him off, Jack.
Sure.
Yeah.
It might actually be a good point for a part 2, because we've barely scratched the surface here. Maybe that would be that would make sense.
Yeah, because we're up at the 55-minute mark now. Maybe we'll give him a call after this. But yeah, like amazing guests. That'll just we barely got to ask him a question because the guy and he wants everything chronological. He was brilliant.
That's phenomenal. I can't wait to have him back, because you do the research, and I'm, as you pointed out, gray in the beard now, so I remember all this stuff vividly
I didn't point that out.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I remember it vividly from the magazines and phone lines back in the day. We used to call for wrestling news. And then with the birth of YouTube, you get a feel for what especially TWA was like in early Eastern Championship Wrestling. But for a guy that actually was there from the ground floor up, that's really, really tremendous. And I'd love to have him back to finish this, because literally I have 3 pages here, and we basically I say it a lot, but it's true. Scratch the surface.
I think we may have asked him 3 questions, but that's cool though. I love when guys just, and as you said to him off camera, we always say to the guests, you just roll with it. And he's taken us on pretty much a chronological history of his career. So we'll definitely get him booked back in again. Maybe if you contact him today, we'll get one penciled in for the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what separates this broadcast from the myriad of other podcasts is the fact that there's a story that needs to be told or hasn't been told, and when you get into it, you're talking some really, really absolutely unique information, and Tony has, again, that perspective of one of the most still beloved periods in wrestling, and that's the ECW phenomenon. So we'll definitely get in touch and have him back. But fans, for now, we're going to sign off. But just to remind you, we have an uber special guest tomorrow at a special time. Do you want to advise the fans of that again, Maurice?
Yes, and this is the way it's fallen. So tomorrow will be episode 399 and episode 400, a double shot tomorrow. 10 p.m. my time, 5 p.m. Eastern, we have Mr. Vance Nevada, man who you've interviewed, Canadian historian. And before that, at the special time of 12 p.m. Eastern, which is 5 p.m. my time, I'll still be in work. Unfortunately, it will be Ernest the Cat Miller of WCW and WWF fame. Very, very memorable characters, particularly, I think, WCW. And he did kind of go into WWE at a later time. So he's going to have stories about a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that Ernest was in one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time, and that was the Wrestler with Mickey Rourke. And what an absolutely memorable character he played in that. So fans, there's going to be a lot of content tomorrow. Again, Ernest the Cat Miller at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then Vance Nevada, author of an extremely comprehensive, excellent book on the history of Canadian professional wrestling. He is a fascinating interview for especially the historian crowd. You're going to want to tune into both. But until then, we are going to bid you adieu and thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned in the future for an announcement for part 2 with Mr. Tony Stetson.